Welcome back to Big Brave Business. I'm your host, Sarah K. Heeter. Big Brave Business is a podcast where we challenge the status quo of traditional business practices. So if you're ready to challenge norms, rewrite the rules, and redefine what it means to lead with courage and integrity, then grab a notebook and let's dive in. Welcome back to the Big Brave Business Podcast. I'm here with my friend and my mutual friend, Gabby Borrero of No Plan B Consulting and Next Generation Network. She describes herself as an entrepreneur, strategist, numbers geek, and mom, and she always sees the cup as half full. And she works with mission-driven business owners to build their network and their business at the same time. So Gabby's kind of known as like the queen of community. And I am so excited to have you on the podcast. Welcome, Gabby.
Thank you, Sarah. I think it's so serendipitous, the relationships with people and where it can go. I was talking to Katie about this the other day, Katie Carson, and I'm like, wait, how did you meet Sarah? Because then you introduced Sarah to me, and then like all these amazing things that have happened so far. So I'm feel so honored to be on here.
Yeah, well, thank you for being here. And yes, to kind of dial that back, if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, first of all, thank you. But second of all, you may remember that like a little over a year ago, after Katie had joined the PodFox team, one of the things that she challenged me with is, Sarah, you need to do more networking. Like this is where you are with the things that your goals that you're trying to accomplish, and then looking at kind of your business model and your activities that you're doing, like basically I challenge you to do more networking. Now, Katie didn't challenge me to do what I did, but she did challenge me to network. And I don't do anything small. So I scheduled over about 5 to 6 weeks, I scheduled over 50 networking calls with people from the internet, one of which was Gabby. And man, I learned a lot from doing those calls. Number one, don't recommend that challenge. So I'm just going to go ahead and put that out there for a lot of reasons. First of all, because there were days that I had like 10 plus meetings on my calendar for the day, and that's exhausting because I still had to run my actual business. Number two, I had no goals or intentions going into those 50 meetings. They were essentially random business owners from the internet. And so I couldn't measure an ROI on the experience of meeting with those folks because I didn't really know why I was networking or what I wanted to get out of it in the first place. And I do think that, and we can talk about this, but I do think there's something to be said for not having to approach every relationship with like a what's in it for me. You can go into it with more of an open heart than that. So it's not that it wasn't helpful, but it was not the most productive or efficient use of my time. So let me put it that way. And then also, I didn't have any plan for keeping track of the people that I met or how to follow up with the people that I really clicked with. So there were some big lessons learned.
Yes.
And I can think back to some of those, especially the earlier conversations, including with you, Gabby, where I know I didn't show up as the version of myself I would now in a networking conversation because you have to practice it. So I'm curious to hear from you. What is the reason why we even like, why is it important to network? You hear people say your network is your net worth, right? But like, what does that even mean? And why does networking even matter? Because I think I was missing this piece when I went into it.
I love this question. And one of the easiest ways that I like to try to symbolize this for people is a set of keys that we each have a set of keys. Mine open different doors than yours open quite naturally. And we hope so, right? Like we hope that my keys can't open the same doors as you, but there's almost no keychain that looks exactly alike. Each of them are so extremely unique. The keys look different. Again, they open different doors in different states, in different countries based on different reasons. And when I network and I get to meet someone who I want to introduce to someone else, I get to say, hey, come on over here. I have the key to open this door. I'm going to open it to let you in. All I'm going to do. I'm going to let you go in there. It doesn't mean you're going to earn your own key, right? It doesn't mean that that's going to be a fit for you or that's going to be a room that you want to stay in. You always can exit, as always. But if I only go throughout this life, especially being a business owner, with my own set of keys, I don't get access to other opportunities. I don't get access to meeting those perhaps high level clients that are hidden behind doors that we can say are gate kept, but in reality, we have to have the right intentions, the right goals, and we have to almost be on the right level, on the right energetic level to be able to take advantage of those opportunities that are going to be placed in front of us. So I say networking is key. Networking, I think, I know is why I am where I am today. My life could have looked extremely different. It's given me so many opportunities that I would have never had from a very young age. Because the thing that we all forget is that we've actually been networking since we were young, in daycare, in preschool, in kindergarten. Yes, you were building relationships with people. And I know that sometimes the word networking can get a bad rep, but what you're doing when you're networking is you're building relationships. And it's just up to you on where those relationships will lead you.
This is so interesting because you're totally right, all the way back in preschool. And we have, in these different phases of our lives, we have different kind of go-to questions that people ask that aren't necessarily the most efficient way to get to know somebody, but it is networking. Like when you're a kid, it's like, what's your favorite color? And then by college, you're like, what's your major? And then now if you're at an entrepreneurship thing, it's like, okay, so what do you do? Right. And honestly, even just adults in general tend to kind of clarify who they are and how they take up space in the world when they meet each other. We categorize each other by our jobs. That is a common thing anyway. I think even in moms groups, it's like, how old are your kids? How many kids and how old are they? And maybe even what genders, right? Like we need our brains categorize the people that we meet, and that's happening all the time in all these different contexts of our lives. So and I love your key analogy. That sounds like exactly like the kind of thing I would say to describe something. So I love that. That was awesome.
Thank
So
you.
I'm curious too. I think that this whole idea of kind of opportunities coming up, and sometimes we go into a space or we go into a relationship hoping it's going to lead to a specific opportunity, but the most magical ones are the opportunities that you didn't even know existed that come about as far as meeting people. But I'm wondering, like, especially because you ended with it's up to you where it goes, how do you find magic opportunity? How does that happen? How can you kind of recreate that? Because yes, it happens organically sometimes and you don't click with others necessarily right away. So, like, how can you sort of increase your chances of something great? And I know at the time that we're recording this, you just did like a collaboration session. So I feel like it's probably gonna piggyback right off of that.
Yes, I like to network with intention based on mission, vision, and values, based on aligned mission. So, in a way, I don't really care so much what you do, but the impact you've made in the world. That's very important to me, is the impact that you're making. So, if you're wanting to create these magical opportunities, you need to find yourself in a room with people who are mission driven and who just so happen to have an aligned mission with you. Whether that's right access, equal access to resources, whether that might be ensuring that people get richer. There's so many like niche reasons why we're doing what we're doing, to give people voices. And then there's all these different people that give people voices too, but in 9,000 different ways that just so happen to be this perfect puzzle piece for you. But the most important thing is getting so outside of your comfort zone. And I think that as a woman entrepreneur, I used to get like wanting to vomit when people say, get outside of your comfort zone, get outside of your comfort zone. But when you ask this question, when I think of all these magical opportunities that I walked into, it's 150% the times where I might not have even wanted to show up to that event. I might have almost talked myself out of it. And then when I showed up, magic happened. But I also released the expectation that anything was going to happen. I was so open to whatever you believe in, right? Whatever higher power you believe in, whatever the universe was going to place in front of me, I knew that I was capable of taking advantage of it. I knew that it must have been the right opportunity for me if I felt it in my gut, in my intuition. But I also knew that if it worked out or if it didn't, I was going to survive either way. It wasn't that big of a deal if this doesn't work out, because it actually might work out 5 years down the line. And that's just as important for me to continue nourishing that relationship. So if you're looking for these magical opportunities, find yourself in rooms with people that are taking up space in larger ways than you could have ever imagined, that will present you with opportunities that are what a dangling carrot should be. I believe that a dangled carrot should bring you closer to your true life's purpose, but also keep you aligned on your path with your mission and your vision and values, and never asking yourself to compromise those things for this opportunity. You should never have to compromise your mission, your beliefs, who you serve and why you serve them, because you have to fit into this pigeonhole of what someone else thinks that you should look like. So I think that's one of the most beautiful ways, is step out into those events where you feel so inspired, but you wouldn't have even gone if you allowed your own inner voice to talk you out of it.
That's really interesting. And yeah, I think putting yourself outside of your comfort zone is definitely being big and brave. And I think that much like kind of the term networking, yeah, it gets said a lot and it isn't necessarily super clear, and also yeah, it's anxiety inducing as well. But in addition to that, it's like, do those words even necessarily mean anything when they're said all the time? And I think that yeah, I think that you've painted that picture really beautifully. I'm curious about the next one, and this is interesting because you've actually built like an entire business off of communities and networking. And one thing that surprised me to learn about you in preparation for this chat today is that you actually have three businesses. So I'm curious, other than starting a whole business about community, how do you balance the workload of making time for networking? And also, because remember, I described like, oh, there were days I had 10 meetings on my calendar, but then I also had to do my regular job, right? That I've built for myself. So, how do you make time for networking and being open and putting yourself into as many like unexpected situations as possible and really putting yourself out there and like still get your work done?
Yes. So my answer to that is my ecosystem. So I upgrade my ecosystem every single year. And what I created for myself was for a way for all of these pieces of me to coexist. No Plan B Consulting, where I consult with nonprofits and I teach different workshops and classes and I coach entrepreneurs. Those are individuals that I find at the events that I host. And those are individuals that join NGN. So it all lives within the same ecosystem. Now, the Vault, that was the initial business that I started with my husband, the Vault Music Studio, that's where our storefront is. So that's where I get to have boots on ground with community. And I get to allow minority women to come in and use our first floor, because we have two floors. The second level is our vocal recording studio, and our first floor is about 700 square feet of just open space, really curated to be able to host pop-up events, to be able to just be active within the community at least once a month. So I really created something that made sense for me originally, even when I had my first and when I was expecting my second. And then I refine my ecosystem every year and I invite bigger people into it. So as I've been able to handle more, as I've been able to achieve more and gain more momentum, I naturally get the attention of individuals that then sit at different levels annually, really. I do one event and it brings someone in that introduces me to someone even bigger, but it all happens at an event that I host. So there's nothing else really on my calendar other than member events or events that I speak at and my public speaking program and some workshops that I host. But those all happen strategically on a quarterly basis. And I have a launch calendar that coincides with when I operate best and when I work best. So people might see a lot of stuff going on right now, but January, February, March, although I have aligned strategic some pretty big events that I'm doing, it's a team that I'm working with. It's not me. It's never me working alone. My network always has my back. My members always have my back because they know that I have their back and their absolute best intentions at heart. And I'm never there to capitalize on something without handing it all to my members first. So I think the way that I balance it is by cutting every single year, cutting away the pieces that don't fit and no longer questioning it, and then ensuring what sits there is something that I'm proud of, is something that I love, something that I'm passionate about, and something that I can do and I can show up and do, and then I can teach a whole team to do as well. So that's kind of the next step that I'm working on, is refining that team, building on that team, and taking advantage of technology and the things that we have at our fingertips. And I always like to say one of my favorite quotes was by the lady that was an actor in How to Get Away with Murder. I forget exactly, but one of the women, she said, if you ever think that I'm successful, know that there are a million things that I'm failing at actively. Because life, this perception of balance is almost a fraud in a way. Balance in a way means that if one's up, one's down. If one's right, like it can be lopsided. I don't ever know if there's that perfect middle balance. So I realized that my most important part right now is to be there with my children and to work my business part time. And that's what I have to do. That's simply the season of life I'm in, and I cannot change it, or else I will regret it likely. So I think if you're going to find balance, you're going to need to create an ecosystem that can grow with you. You're going to need to audit that system and make sure people that are on your side are in there. And if you have gaps, just invite people in. That's one of my favorite things to do.
I think what's so interesting about this is I feel like what you have kind of done is this is what I want, so I'll create it. And I am the same. And I like to explain that's like how I got into podcasting in the first place. I started listening to podcasts and I was like, I could do this. So I started a podcast. And then once I started a podcast, people were like, hey, can you help me get one on the internet? And I was like, of course I can. And then I thought I could start a whole business about this, right? Like that is really just me. When I attend events, I can't help but think I should host an event like this. I can't help but think that, I mean, just in almost every context, it's definitely an inherited trait. It's something I come by honestly, but I'm curious, Gabby, because first of all, not everybody is built like that, but secondly, there are so many great opportunities other people like yourself have already created that we can walk into and enjoy and embrace. So how do we balance, like for the person listening who isn't necessarily going to create their own networking group, but they want to attend other people's, or they're trying to figure out how to do intentional networking? How do they balance their workload with going to events and meeting people?
I think the first issue that I find, and I always ask people, is what communities are you a part of right now? And oftentimes I get met with a blank stare because they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, what communities are you actively engaged with for entrepreneurship and business? Because I know as a mom, as a this, as a that, you're likely already a part of multiple communities, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, right? Football, soccer. There's so many different communities, church, etc. As an entrepreneur and as a business owner, what communities are you a part of where you are a fixture, where people know you as the go-to? And you can feel free to start with one. Feel there is absolutely no need to sign up for 5 different coexisting communities at the same time and try to make it work. I really don't believe that that is the way to success in networking and in finding balance within creating your community. I think that you should find one virtual one and one local one. If local does not work for you, then find 2 virtual ones, maybe one free and one paid, and try it out for a year, not for a month, not for 3 months, not for 6 months, but for a year. This is a habit. This is a community you're building. This is a family that you're building. Like this is quite literally a living, breathing organism. These are living humans, and you need to give them a chance again and again. And you need to get to know them again and again. And you need to see what's for you and what's not for you. And I say that it always takes a good 6 months to a year to really enmesh yourself within a given community and to be able to really start being known as that go-to. It's not about answering the right post at the right time. It's about showing up. And if you can't show up in 5 different places, pick one. Pick one and show up once a month for 6 months and see what starts to unfold for you. And it might not even unfold within that group. It might unfold outside of that group, that things just start falling into place. But I believe that we all should be a part of a community specifically for the work that you do as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, not talking about a local chamber of commerce. If you're a part of one, that's great, but also a part of something that's bigger than yourself, right? A larger organization. So I think that's my number one thing. And you're not going to balance five at the same time. Again, try one. And once you've really felt like you found that one, then add on another. But don't be afraid to really love one and really feel like what it feels like to be in community with people around you. So I think that would be my number one thing to ask you, what communities are you already in? Are you loving them, right? Are they serving your needs? And if they're not, consider expanding and do a trial of, let's say, three, and then pick one to two that you can tangibly continue for at least 6 months to a year. And know that that's an investment into yourself, right? Into your business, into your personal brand, into who you are as an individual, and the ways that you can benefit others as much as they can benefit you.
I love your angle so much. Well, for a million reasons, but I love, and there's some things I want to dig into, but I want to first reiterate. So, some of you may not know this, but I teach a course at Arizona State University. I've been teaching it for several years. It used to be called Personal Identity, Public Service, and American Democracy. Now it's just called Public Service and American Democracy, but it's the same course. So, kind of the whole point of the course is about civic engagement and how to be engaged in your communities. And the whole first part of the class is understanding your personal identity and what communities you're already a part of, because that's where you're building social capital. And it's literally based on exactly the things you were saying. So I love this. And I especially want to reiterate this because I've been working on some information for social media to talk about this, because people at the time we're recording this are feeling particularly mobilized to like, how do I get engaged in my community and how do I participate other than like voting? Like, what else can I do? Right. And so because I literally teach a class about that, I've been working on putting some information together for social media, and it starts with exactly what you're talking about. Of so many people who take this class want to try to tell me that they're not part of any communities, that if they had more time they'd join communities, but they just really don't have time for that. And so we have to like really step back with those students and say like, no, you're already in so many communities. Like, being a human, that is part of the human experience. And just by default, for those students, they're part of this class. That is a community that they're part of. So when you kind of look at like, you live in a neighborhood, maybe you live in an apartment building, you live in a city, in a county, in a state, you are either in school or you're an alum of a school or whatever, that is something that you have community with other humans. So any Facebook groups you're in, any like, these are communities that you are a part of. Not all communities need to look like joining an association for such and such, right? Like, there are so many communities that we're just inherently building social capital in all the time. Now, certainly some people have more social capital than others, and helping people understand like, what social capital do you have? How can you build social capital? And then how do you use that social capital to engage with and impact your community and to solve the problems that your communities are facing, right? Like, that is what this whole course is about. So I love so much of what you said. I feel like you could teach the class that I teach. Like, let me give you a job application, because like, I think that apartment would be like, man, she's nailing all these same key concepts just from your professional experience. So I love that. And then kind of another thing that I wanted to really explore with you is this idea of like finding group to start engaging with. So obviously you have Next Generation Network and it's virtual. So, well, you do have in-person things as well if you're local to like the New Jersey area, but you do have this entire virtual platform for somebody who might want to dig in to exploring some groups to see what's right for them. But what you and I also talked about, I've been participating, I've talked about it on this podcast before, in my local chapter in person of NAWBO, the National Association of Women Business Owners. We chatted and you're like, oh yeah, I tried my local chapter. It didn't feel like a good fit for me, but I'm so glad it feels like a good fit for you. And one of the things I've kind of struggled with in getting more involved at NAWBO is like, this is the first group in person in the Phoenix area that I have really dug into. And I have stopped to ask myself, like, before I make this my entire personality, should I try some others? Like, I mean, I have opportunities to step up and to step in and to make an impact in this place, and it feels good and I like the people, but then it's also like, am I putting all my eggs in one basket too quickly? Should I diversify? So, anyways, all of that to say, how do you find, especially in person, how do you find communities in person to dig into, but online as well? And then how do you know if it's a good fit? How do you like what makes it a good fit?
Yes. Yes. So my favorite answer for this is actually Eventbrite. I love scouring Eventbrite and seeing what new events and therefore communities are being built around me. And to answer your second question, it's the marketing. It's how they market themselves. It's the images that you see on Eventbrite. What are they using to describe this event? Is it something that I'm actually interested in? And then if I'm willing to go, how do I feel? I traditionally know as soon as I walk in a room and sit down next to someone if this is going to be for me or not. Because in any network or in any community, the members within it are, of course, extensions of that community. So if I'm sitting down next to someone who's been to this event several times, I'm going to get the lay of the land. And I'm going to have to like that lay of the land in order to stay. And that's where a lot of communities might not hit the nail on the head for us, right? We might love the marketing. We might love the what they're saying to us. But then when we got there, we realized that it wasn't quite what it seemed. And there felt like, right, there's something missing. I don't know. It just felt off. Like it just felt like those weren't my people. Are a lot of things that I hear about women that go to different communities and different events and they don't, right? It's just, it didn't feel like they were my people. Normally, it's from the words they're sharing. There are past events that I used to go to. And if you use the word competition, I already know the event's not for me. If you never mention networking, if you never mention community, I also know the event's also not for me and the community's not for me because if those are some of the things that I love to do, I'm going to want to join a community that also loves to do that. That it's kind of like inherently weaved within that given community. So if you're looking for the right place, well, if you're looking for your place initially, try Eventbrite because Instagram is going to be a basket full of you don't even want to know what's going to happen when you type in the word network. So look on Eventbrite and actually see who's active and who's doing things. I think that every good community and network these days also has an in-person component. So just check around, look at different areas, look at Miami, look at New York, look at, right, like look at different towns and see what's going on, different towns near you in case you can't find anything in your direct area. Put a little bit of a radius on it and see how far you're willing to travel. And then kind of like we mentioned earlier in the episode, step outside of your comfort zone, go see what it's like. Because the last thing that you want to do is spend the rest of the year thinking, I should have gone. I should have tried that out. I know I should have made it over there. I'm going to go to one of their things. It's like, okay, if networking is not a priority for you right now, that's fine. If building your community isn't a priority for you, that is so fine. You might not be in the stage of life and business where that makes sense for you right now, but just keep it tabbed and know that when you're ready, that's one of the places that you're going to start. People also say that to me all the time, Gabby, I love NGN. I love all the stuff that you do. I'm just not ready yet. And I'm like, I'm right there with you and I honor you. I am in no way, shape, or form going to try to convince you to do something that you know you don't feel like you're ready to do. I'm not that person. Like, what am I going to do? This is for you. This is your decision. So I think try Eventbrite, go to something local, and believe what you see. Believe what you see. Believe what you hear. Believe the marketing. Believe it. Don't become that person that's like, oh, I know you see all that stuff online and it looks really scary, but trust me, once you get here, it's great. No, that's not necessarily sustainable either, right? Like we need leadership that's willing to change. And we need leadership that's willing to accept that there's a new generation coming that's entirely different than the one prior. So I also think that like you need to be willing to say, no, you know what? They don't have it all together and I'm willing to wait. I don't need to participate while they're getting all their ducks in a row. Because that's when we end up taking on leadership roles that yes, we could have had, right? But we could have just been building our own at the same time, which I think is some of the issues that these older organizations are facing. Women that in today's age, there are essentially no barriers to opening your own community, right? You can do it on Facebook, you can do it on LinkedIn, you can do it on anywhere. Oh my gosh, you could literally do it anywhere on Twitch, etc. So you're going to need to have a lot of value add, and very, very mission aligned in order for someone to build community with you, right? So I think that that's always keep in mind that you don't need to be anyone's hero. And if it is a sinking ship, you don't need to be captain of that sinking ship. You can say, this wasn't my responsibility to begin with. I'm so happy and honored that you've given me these opportunities and these chances, but I have other things that I'm doing. So I'm going to prioritize that. And I'm going to prioritize myself, because exactly like you said in the beginning, right? You can almost feel a little bit of a paralysis around making that decision. Should I be leadership of this organization? Right? Should you? Is it aligned 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Is this going to be something that really move the needle forward for you? Or if it's just for fun, let's say it's just for fun, right? Like, let's say it's just to build relationships, and call it what it is. Never be afraid to say, I know it might not be the great long term, but I love it. And I'm like, I love that for you then. Like, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Setting the expectation. Yeah.
Okay, I have three more questions for you. So one is, and I feel like you're really touching on this here, is kind of the ethics behind community. You also mentioned free or paid communities, and then you've talked quite a bit about like the right fit community and kind of what may be warning signs for you that it's not an environment that you want to be part of. So I feel like that's really related. That's why I want to start here with these last three questions. So before we hit record, you said something that's been on your heart is the kind of ethics behind building community, and people want to, I think what I was kind of getting from what you said before is like people wanting to build communities not necessarily from an ethical place, like their intentions aren't necessarily ethical. So I'm curious, like, I love to talk about business ethics. So I'm curious, for what are the ethics of some of these communities and building community?
I always think of community as the sum being greater than just one part. And I think what we've seen a lot since COVID is one individual building a community and it being self-serving. You looking at that community and looking at the way in which it was built, almost in a way like a corporation, right? And realizing the only one that's benefiting is the person at the top. And it can kind of feel weird. And I think there are a lot of people who, through time, have come to see this person they were idolizing as, wait, she's going on vacation here, she's doing this, she has this car, she has that car, she has this, she has that. But what about all of us that have contributed to that? What have we received other than this pipeline dream? That have any of us actually achieved it? Right? It's I think is that commute. It's just sometimes it gets twisted, and I think we've made we've attempted to. I do not think it will hold whatsoever, and I don't think it ever has actually held for the long term. Make it a commodity, something that can be, you look at the shiny package and you purchase it. But I think that because community is filled with a bunch of other humans that tell stories and that share experiences, I don't think it will ever successfully be commodified without the people always kind of mutinying and regaining control and saying, no, we are taking her down, right? Imagining this big statue and everyone kind of taking it down and saying, we do not need to idolize someone who never deserved to be idolized to begin with. So I think it's always an issue and a red flag to me if you join a community and the core point of that community is to upsell you. I think that that's kind of weird to me. And terminology like, oh, I just want to get to know you. I just want to get to know you as good as I can. And traditionally, what comes after that behind the scenes is so that I can sell you to the highest package that you can manage to pay. And I'm going to sell you on this dream that I cannot ever possibly fulfill. But that's great because it's not up to me. It's up to you, right? It's a mind F of sorts where you're now realizing, am I enough, right? Am I not enough? Am I paying enough? Am I abundant enough? I think any community that makes you question yourself and your sense of worth and who you are as an individual, and that, am I making enough money to be here? Number one is a no-go for me. Like, I've definitely gone to events before where I realize I'm giving Marshalls and TJ Maxx and Target, and they're giving Bergdorf like they're giving the top of the top, and they make it known that is what it is, right? That's not a community for me. And I think that you have to know your values, again, your mission, your vision, your values, and you can sniff out these communities because largely there is no mission. The mission is only to get more money from you. The mission is only to keep you staying in here when it doesn't serve you whatsoever, and kind of curtailing around questions like, tell me the impact that your community has made, or tell me what the mission is behind your community. I would look away from blanket statements like, we want everyone to win, we want everyone to make money, we want to it's I'd rather you not join a community that's blanket statements. If it is, it's probably going to be a free community because they're going to try to upsell you in some sort of way. I would love for you to join a community that is strategic, right? In that it does have a set mission that you can see. It's palpable when you go to these events. Like, you truly see that they're trying to, in NGN specifically, we aim to collaborate across socioeconomic backgrounds. So you own a storefront, you should be collaborating with this woman over here that just got off unemployment, that was on Section 8 her entire life. And we're gonna, right, like, we're gonna help her get access to resources she wouldn't have gotten in previous communities. She may not have been taken, quote unquote, seriously, right? So in NGN, we love to have a collaboration of women who are mission driven, regardless of what gets reported on their income taxes, of what kind of car they're driving, what kind of clothes they're wearing. But that's because of my experience within networking. That's why it's my network's and my organization's mission. So it's I think that's always a red flag you can see when, is there a mission here, and is that work being done, or is this really all serving one individual? Was a good question to ask.
This is so interesting, Gabby, because the push over the last several years for creating memberships and the link between creating a membership and calling it a membership versus calling it community, or what is the community aspect of a membership. And as somebody who did create a membership and ended it in the last 18 months, because honestly, I know what my mission was, which was, what the idea behind it was, that I knew that not everyone who has a podcast or wants to start a podcast can afford to just hire an individual consultant and producer. And I still want them to win. I still want their podcast to win. I want them to have access to the resources that we provide our one-on-one, like, high ticket clients, that we're holding their hands through having a successful podcast. I wanted, because it's my mission, I wanted everybody who starts a podcast with the intention to use their voice to make the world a better place, I want all of those people to win. I want all of them to have successful podcasts, whether they can afford to hire me to produce or not, right? That was the intention behind it. And what very quickly ended up happening is we switched the language from calling it a membership to calling it a digital subscription, because the community aspect was not there. It was not present. The opportunities we hoped it would get there, but the opportunities for people who subscribe to this digital subscription to collaborate and to get to know each other and to help each other really wasn't built into the structure of our offer. And it ended up kind of feeling like we're creating a ton of work and not actually helping people get a ton of results, even though the information is so good. It's spinning our wheels of doing so much work that isn't actually creating results. And so that's why we decided to end the audio revolution, or at least pause it, revamp it, working on what that's going to look like. But I think I share this experience because I think that there are so many of us. We've been sold, you should start a digital course. We've been sold, you should be a coach. We've been sold, you should do group programs, masterminds, one-to-many of some version. And then now memberships and masterminds, I think both seem to be the hot buzzwords. And this idea of like starting a membership or starting a mastermind, I've always said I would like my next big investment in myself professionally to be a mastermind environment, but it's so hard to tell whether it's going to be, what's going to happen after that 5-figure investment, right? Like, what kind of experience am I actually going to get? Because if it's group coaching, I don't want to spend 5 figures on it personally. And that's no judgment of what works for other people. What's right for you might be different for me, and so on and so forth. But if everybody's calling things masterminds, they can put any price tag they want on it. And you don't know what kind of community is going to be on the other side of that. So I think that I want to kind of call out those kind of buzzwords because it does feel like in the past year, 2 years, everybody has or has started a membership. And I
Yeah.
think that really feeds into this idea of, okay, but what's the point of the membership? Is the point of the membership for them to expand their business model so that they can serve one to many? Because 250 people paying them $50 a month makes them make good money? Or is the point to
Ooh.
bring people together? Yeah. I mean,
You're
and
right. You're onto something.
the
And
people who
that's
are
the
doing
question people
this,
should be asking themselves.
it's not because, to be clear, the people who are doing this are not bad people, and that's why I share my they could be, but that's why I share my own experience. I had the best of intentions in creating it was related to my mission. It was how I want to serve people and what the whole point was of creating Podfox, right? Like it served that whole mission idea, right? And then in actual implementation, I realized this isn't really a membership, right? Like it isn't really. There is no community aspect and or a very limited community aspect. And that really wasn't the point of it. So is calling it a membership even the right terminology? But yes, we're always looking at our business model because we're business owners. So like of course we are. So
Yes.
assuming the best
Yes.
intentions of the people who are doing this, but also yes, none of us want to be like canceled or this falling statue of our own kind of communities saying like, hey, I had a bad experience and this is why. And now this person is on
Yes.
my blacklist, right?
Yes. Yes. I think the math is always going to make sense, right? When it comes to opening up a membership model, oh, the math is going to be spectacular, right? Like I save time, I make impact until you understand just how much work it takes. And that
Mhm.
a traditional community will probably take 3 years of work to get to where you'd like it to be because it's another arm of your business, right? Like it's not like we just whipped up this course out of nowhere. Like it's community. It takes a lot to stay to be built, to stay together, to stay aligned. It's this balancing. It's like an octopus, right? So absolutely. I think there's many who've tried, many who will try, and the numbers are always going to make sense, but just understanding that the work that you're going to have to put in is going to make those numbers make sense. Right?
Yeah.
Like the numbers will make sense because of the work that you will be hours upon hours of work that you have to do. And if you're like, oh, that those numbers really aren't worth it, there you go. Right? Like there you
Yeah.
go. Like put it on pause and wait, right? Wait it until you're like, wait, no, now this is like a perfect mix. Like this makes perfect sense right now.
Yeah.
But yes, I think that it was pretty big 2020, 2021, 22, 23. And I think that now based on astrology and what a lot of my favorite astrologers say, like Donna Cass and Benedicta, they also say that as we're entering the age of Aquarius, which is happening now into 2025, and I guess the next decade is how long it holds for, it's authentic leadership. It's
Mm.
building authentic communities. It's building communities that are stand for something, right? Like stand for something outside of just we make six-figure entrepreneurs. Like just really stand for something and that make a difference and make an impact. And so I think that I'm excited to see what 2025 brings us in the age of events and communities.
Me too. And I feel like that's such a good place to kind of leave off. But I have really two more things that I want to ask you. So, for the sake of time, I want to make it quick. What's your top tip as you're networking and getting into community? What's your top tip for remembering who you met and following up with them?
Ooh, my top tip is taking a picture of
Okay.
the screen, taking a selfie with them. It always stays in my camera roll. I post it automatically to my story or to LinkedIn, and memories are going to come up, right? Memories are going to come up. Oh my God, we met each other 3 years ago. And we're like, oh my gosh, I remember that. So keep it in your calendar. When Katie and I were getting ready to do our podcast the other day, I literally typed her name into my Gmail, and I'm like, "Oh my God, Katie! Our first initial call was February of 2023. Like it's only been a year and a half of us knowing each other. It's felt like eons." So actually book a call somewhere that you can track, like through through a calendar like setup, but also take a picture and then share that picture. Like get that picture out of your camera roll and out somewhere where you can tag them, and then they follow you and you guys become a part of each other's ecosystem. And I think that largely sometimes we let the universe handle the rest. And as much as can be very intentional of your next ask. Like, hey, I have a networking call. Like, why don't you hop on and join? That's all good and well, only if it aligns with the individual. So sometimes I honestly like leaving networking calls and saying, like, let's catch up. Like, whenever we feel called, let's catch up again. And I don't think you automatically need to get something else on the calendar right away, but kind of like leaving that open space for at least a year of getting to know each other. I say is always like a really healthy number.
A picture is such a good idea. I think there have been times where even just this is a whole other conversation for a whole other podcast in my sales process and like lead follow up. I sometimes, if I can't place someone I talked to 3 months ago, 6 months ago, even a year ago, I will look them up on social media and I look at their face and I try to like think, do I remember talking to this person? And sometimes it's like not at all. And sometimes it does trigger like, oh yes, I do remember she wanted to do a podcast about travel. Oh yes, I do remember they wanted to talk about starting a bakery, right? Like there's things that I'm like, okay, yes, it clicks. I remember this. So I think taking a picture yourself and posting it and tagging makes so much sense. And especially if you put something like chatted all about this lady's podcast idea, her future podcast. And then when it pops back up later, or when you're scrolling back through memories later, you actually literally have that. I think that's brilliant. I love it. Thank you for that. Okay, last one. I like to end all of these Big Brave Business podcast conversations with the same question, which can be work related, but it does not have to be. And that is, what is something that is bringing you joy right now?
As soon as you asked that question, I thought maybe you were going to ask for like a quote. That's what I love to ask for. So I was like, oh, I am remembering a quote in my head. I love quotes. But when you asked that question, immediately my youngest son's face popped into my head, my
Oh,
baby, Carlos, who's 8 months old. And I think that I feel so honored to be able to be a mother. And I feel so honored to help, uh, to be there with them. I they bring me so much joy. Do they also bring me a lot of other things? Yeah, they do. They bring me some germs, they bring me some crazy stuff, but my children truly are the absolute loves of my life. And I would never, ever, 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 ever want to imagine a lifetime where they weren't mine. So I think they're bringing me the utmost joy. I feel so honored to be a mother, and I'm just so excited to continue to see them growing. And I'm just like, it's so weird to me that they're mine. It's always just so crazy. But are they ours? Right? Like they're for the world is what I like to say. Like they're a gift for the world. So they're all of ours, but they're my little ones. So I'll
that's
love them
so
forever.
beautiful. I love that so much. And I don't have anything as like beautiful to share about what's making me happy. I was trying to think like, do I have a deeper one? So full transparency, we're recording this the week, like literally to the day after the US election. And if I'm going to be really transparent with you all, and if you follow me on social, which hopefully you do, and thank you if you do, then you know how I have been handling this, but I have been struggling. And I think so. This is an interesting time to ask me, like, what is bringing me joy? And what I am going to say is that I am finding joy. This is going to be right on theme in community with people. There's a solidarity and a feeling seen, feeling heard, feeling valued in connecting with people in this time. And I've talked about it on this podcast a lot, but Threads has been the number one place where I have been able to connect with some incredible thought leaders and very action oriented movers and shakers and change makers, and the community and the you're not alone aspect of it is such a part of it, but also the inspiration of like how much more there is to do and how much more we can do, and not going to like a place of feeling sad or defeated or disinterested, disconnected, unplugged. It's the opposite, right? Like it's like, oh, I feel inspired and fired up and motivated, and I can walk hand in hand with some of these other folks who share some core values with me, and we can move forward together. And I think that is something we need all the time, not just when something feels like it's rocked your world, but also you just need, I think that's one of the best parts of having community, right? And tapping into your community is to have that. So that's been a really beautiful thing. And I think in my emotional response to some of the things that have been going on in the past week, my partner has been telling me, get off social media. And you know what? I did. I logged out of Facebook. I deleted the app. I did not delete my account, and I did not block some of the folks who I was struggling with on Facebook. I just logged out and deleted the app for now. Like, that's a much less permanent decision, but it helped. So you can do both, right? Like, look at the spaces, and this is true for any kind of community. Look at the spaces that fill you up, light you up, build you up, see you, hear you, value you, empower you, and look at the spaces that drain you and raise your blood pressure and keep you from sleeping, and like remove yourself from those when possible, right? How do you take space there? So
Absolutely.
weird. It feels weird right now to say that. And I've been a pretty unhappy person this past week, but there have been a lot of moments of joy, and it all comes back to community. So very on theme. So
Very
thank
on
you.
theme.
Thank you so much for being here, Gabby. I love chatting with you. I love your energy and your light. And I know you've talked about it, like people comment on that all the time, but it is truly a blessing to know you and to have you in our lives and talk about a gift to the world. You so absolutely are. This world is such a better place with you in it. So thank you for being here, and thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you so much. Thank you.